Hey guys, Palsteron here, and today let's talk about 9 things I would like to see changed in Path of Exile 2 for patch 0.2. So tomorrow, from whenever this video comes out, is going to be the 0.2 reveal, and we have some infos about it, right? There's going to be a new class, there's going to be Huntress, there's going to be at least 2 new ascendancies that we know of, one for Warrior and one for Mercenary. That is all to be seen, but before I wanted to take a little bit of time to reflect on my first experience of PoE 2, which was a little bit rocky. It started off really high, and then once I got to endgame, it dropped off quite significantly. I wasn't really able to get into it as much as I initially wanted to, and I think that's really a pity. And while they will not be able to address all of the things I will discuss in this video, I still think it's important to kind of, I don't know, put it out there. Even if a few of those points will get worked out, I'm pretty happy about it. I would love to play more and more of this game. I'll be here for the ride. When it comes to these critiques, they come from a place of love, mostly because I've been waiting for this game for a long time. I want this game to do extremely well. I want it to be the next best ARPG on the market. And so we're just going to go over some points. I also tried to make it a point to not, or as little as possible, make comparisons to Path of Exile 1, or just say, just take this from PoE 1. I'm sure there will be 1 or 2 examples where that's not true, but overall, I tried to go with what they basically gave us, which is they want to be different from Path of Exile 1. So let's jump into it. This is kind of my warm-up point before we get into some of the more complex ones, simply because I don't think you should get punished to that extent, even in a game like Path of Exile 2. Obviously, they're trying to make this game a lot more serious, and that means you have to invest into your defenses, otherwise you're going to get punished. And while I think in theory that's cool, and restrictions can breed innovation and make it so people pay more attention to the defenses, make more interesting, well-rounded builds, you're also going to say that most people play softcore for a reason. 95+%, at least that's the stats from Path of Exile 1, play ARPGs, softcore, whatever you want to call them, right? And hardcore is an opt-in, right? So Self-Fun is an opt-in, hardcore is an opt-in. So having these kind of restrictions, it's just not fun for a lot of people, me included. I wouldn't even mind if they only give you, for example, 2 portals. I don't want people to just like go in and throw their corpses against an enemy until they can loot it, sure. But I would like to at least have this one feeling where you die and you go back in and you kind of get your revenge, or whatever you want to call it, right? It feels good. It just feels good. And having only 1 portal feels kind of bad. So would be nice to get another try, even in mundane maps. Number 2 is be more bold in endgame. Shake up things quite a bit. When it comes to endgame currently in Path of Exile 2, it is extremely sterile. And I have a... If there's anything I dislike about Path of Exile 2 right now, it is the endgame loop. Having the motivation, getting goals in this like atlas, in this infinitely generated, like, I don't know, whatever you call this, it's just really hard for me. And that's mostly because there's just not really much happening. Now, in theory, there is a lot to be done here, right? Like, you have these different biomes, different landscapes that you can do different stuff with. But all you really have is these, like, I don't know, like, it looks cute, right? But there's no difference. There's like, obviously, there's citadels, right? And that's about it. You have towers, which people apparently think is the only problem in the game or whatever. But no. Even if they change towers, I mean, the game's kind of stale, and there's so much to be done here. Like, just on the top of my head, what do I have here? Random encounters in endgame. We just came up with this on stream. Like, why can't there be ambushes, like pirates or whatever? Why can't there be all of a sudden I don't know, you're scouting here, and all of a sudden there's like this palace, right? Like, Parandus is there with his golden coins or whatever, like a kingdom, a huge kingdom to loot. Or what was the other one? Quests, right? Like, they try to be a lot more RPG-ish. There's so many things you can do here, and I'm sure they want to add this over time. And I don't want to, obviously it's early access, but it's still like some sort of random encounters I think would be very nice. And if there's any time to be bold, it is the early access. And that is something that I'm pretty adamant on, because people always say, oh, you can't critique it, it's early access. But at the same time, then do risky stuff, right? Like, if not now, when are you gonna do it? And I know this doesn't seem like very targeted feedback, but I just can't shake the feeling that there's not much going on right now. And as they said, they kind of scraped together an endgame, and that's all fine and dandy. I just want to notice that, like, surgically changing small things, I don't think will help here. I think you have to drop a bomb on here. Like, it has to completely and utterly not change, but be a lot more of anything. If I'm looking at this layout, I am just confused where I am at all times. I don't know what's going on here. I know that I can click on this and then I'm back to the start. But in general, it doesn't feel like I'm really following anything. We don't have any quests, right? Nothing to really go off of. So I really hope they can figure this out pretty soon so we can start exploring what they actually want to do with the endgame. Number 3, reduce endgame downtime. The current way to juice up your map is basically to find a good spot, complete all the maps you don't want to run later, then do the tower, then put in a tablet so you can do the juicy stuff on the maps that you want to run. Kind of like make a zone full of juicers, and the setup time takes quite a bit, and that is just currently not really fun, at least in my opinion. So towers on its own have been revealed that they want to do more with towers. Towers are actually going to be real maps and whatnot. I don't know why. I personally think the best idea would be to just have a tower here. You click on it and you put in your tablet, right? And that's that. But the point I really want to drive home is that it's not just towers. It's like the setup in general that is annoying, and having more ways to complete stuff would be cool. Now, if they want to keep tablets, the only thing I've written down here is maybe give it a unique loot table. For example, make Prism of Beliefs only drop in towers or something. Not only will you make it more exciting and people actually wanted to complete it, it would also maybe spawn a meta where people are rushing towers, right? Like go from tower to tower to tower. So you have another playstyle that you can kind of pursue. Number 4 is the thing I don't think you really notice at the start, but the more you play and the more friction you get from doing the same thing over and over, the more it really strikes me how PoE2 is more aesthetics than practicality currently, and I would really like to reverse that at least a little bit. And I call this kind of the well problem. So why does a well exist? Well, in theory, you could say there's no reason for it to exist. But then again, you could make anything automated, right? You could make loot automated, everything just gets sucked up and you have zero friction in the game. Well, is it really a game then? The answer is no, and this is a very fine line that devs usually have to tread, and it is definitely not an easy one. But for me personally, and I don't even mean to make this just about the well is just the perfect example of something that, for example, in Path of Exile 1 is just natural, right? You get back to your hideout, your flasks are filled. You can even, like, okay, just do this, and it's going to be refilled, right? You do this, it's refilled. They don't really make that like a theme. It just doesn't really matter, right? It's just obvious. But in this game, you need to press a well. I'm not really sure why that is. Now, you could argue, well, it's very thematic, right? It is more RPG-ish. But, like, if you think about it, so you go to a well and you load up both your mana potion and your health potion. If this is about, like, RPG-ish, isn't it kind of weird that you're filling up the same, like, 2 different flasks from the same well? Is it just water that goes through a filter inside the flask? I'm getting silly, obviously, but you kind of know what I mean. But what I'm trying to say is this sort of aesthetic over practicality is something that kind of goes through the whole game. For example, with vendor recipes being removed and being kind of offset to certain, I don't know, tablets where you have to recombine or you have to sell. There's no more just a vendor that does it all. Like I mentioned earlier, you have the towers. Instead of just clicking on them and going your merry way and do what you want to do, you have to first complete the tower, and now they're making the towers more of a thing, which seems like kind of they didn't really read the room correctly, right? So what I'm trying to say is this is something for them to figure out. Currently, for a game, like most ARPGs are also meant for long play sessions. It is a sweaty genre. So whereas in an RPG, maybe a single player RPG or something, you would think that maybe you play a few hours a day. In ARPGs, I mean, there's a lot of people who play a ton, right? They take their week, even like if they don't always have time to play, they take their weekend off, they go into an absolute like crazy session. And that's just kind of it. It's called grinding for a reason, grinding gear games, right? And turns out if you grind a lot, you see all the small extra clicks that you usually have to do. If you only have to do them once or twice, you don't notice them. If you have to do them 1,000, 2,000 times, you're gonna notice. And here I'd really like them to reevaluate some of the choices they've made. For example, remove vendor recipes. Some of these choices just seem to have been made to not be PoE1, which I can understand, but I would really like for them to put practicality first. Number 5, make mapping more enjoyable and less frustrating. And I think that we can all kind of agree that the layouts are a little bit big and everything, and that's definitely something they should be working on. However, what irks me a little bit more are the map objectives or the lack thereof. Right now, our map objective is kind of just kill all rare monsters, but that doesn't really have to be the case, right? Kill all rare monsters makes sense if you have a very linear map, like I don't know, you have the rares here, right, on the way. And if you're missing them, then it's because you went too fast and you didn't kill them, or you just missed them, and that's kind of your fault. But most layouts in PoE2 right now are kind of like this, and then there's like small crevasses somewhere or whatever. Maybe there's like weird things in between. And it is just kind of frustrating having to find every single rare that's like here and whatnot. In something like this, maybe killing the boss would make a lot more sense. Or even, for example, kill 70% of all monsters. Usually if you've done that, you have done your due diligence in terms of clear. And if there's 1 or 2 rares missing on the side, that's kind of whatever. Some other layouts, maybe you have to kill the boss or just randomize this completely and kind of, I don't know, throw a little bit of wrench in it, makes it a little bit fresher. Either way, I think that it's kind of silly having to kill all rare monsters every single time. It also makes it so different playstyles aren't really allowed as much, something like boss rushing or whatever, because in order to actually traverse here, it's not like in PoE1, for example, where you can just skip a map, right, and not complete it. In order to traverse here, you very much have to complete these. So making that more frustrating also makes mapping in general more frustrating. And then another point here is give us some agency on what map we're running. I'm not really sure how to do that right now because they want this thing to be very, I don't know, rogue lightish, where you kind of just have to do. And if there's a bad layout here, well then tough shit, you can go around it, right? And that's all fine and dandy, but it would be cool that, for example, have like a currency that re-rolls it randomly, kind of like a Horizon Orb in Path of Exile 1. I don't know if that is the whole solution. I'm sure they're going to have to rethink how they do layouts. It's not like I love layouts. I could put it here as another point, but I think that is so much work that focusing on other stuff first is probably more realistic. Number 6, buff armor. And yes, I said buff armor. I did not say buff melee. And that is mainly because I think that melee had a pretty rough start because they released maces first. And just in the whole ARPG genre in general, what kind of holds true is the slower attacks, the more clunky, the less people are going to like that. Some people absolutely love slam playstyle and that's their thing, but those are a small minority in general. If they had started, for example, with something with more attack speed like swords or spears, I think the whole narrative of melee would have been a lot different. And we're going to talk about that as well. But armor is the big deal right now. So if you, for example, start as a warrior, you will notice that armor is not very strong and you don't really have much else to pick here. There's no life nodes on the tree. So you're kind of forced, quote unquote, if you want to do very hard content, into ES nodes. For example, would you see, I mean, I don't know if it's exactly this pathing, but this is, for example, the pathing I used here. A lot of the pathing you're going to see is something like this, or if you're a little bit more over there, you might even take Spiral into Depression. And you have this very awkward pathing where you need to dedicate like half your passive tree towards Energy Shield, or what a lot of people do as well, if they have the pathing capacity, is they actually go all the way over here to enhance reflexes, bestial skin, and acrobatics, and then just kind of try to make evasion work. Maybe they kind of also get here to take escape velocity and freedom of movement. Very efficient 2-pointers. They're probably going to come from the bottom, but you kind of get what I mean. It is very awkward that your main defense is not really like in your main area. And this is something that they have to tackle. And I think that buffing armor is really the only way to make melee builds and left side builds in general more efficient. Now, the reason why they have to buff armor, first up, is because mobs hit for more in PoE2 relative to PoE HP. Now, if you want to know more about the armor formula, there is quite a big of a change to PoE1. They actually made armor a lot worse than in PoE1 for some reason, even though enemies hit harder. And armor gets worse and worse the bigger the hit is. If you want to check that out, Crip has, I think, 2 or 3 videos about that topic, so I'm not going to talk about that again. But people have been noting that there is kind of an issue, and one of the biggest issues is actually that armor only works for fizz damage. And in PoE1, that's a little bit less of an issue because you have other ways to solve elemental damage. You have a lot more access to Ellie res, you have other shenanigans than just that. You can scale as much life as you want, but if armor is really just a solution for physical damage and it does nothing against chaos or Ellie, that's kind of an issue. So before we get more tools, what can we do about that? Coincidentally, Last Epoch actually has a very nice solution that makes armor work for Ellie damage as well, but at less of an effectiveness, right? So that you still don't get a super strong defense, you just have something there. And in general, the armor formula will still have to be adjusted even if they do this. That's how bad armor is. But yeah, one thing that makes me a little bit nervous is they actually had an interview where Mark kind of talked about armor as if it kind of existed, which I find a little bit troubling because he said like 15% and we're going to do something in the future. But it felt like he thought it just needed some adjusting. Whereas I really, after playing my totem build, I really feel like it just doesn't really exist. Like compared to evasion and energy shield, it's like basically non-existent. So it would be like making armor good would literally be like giving this part of the tree defense, right? Like it would be such a big deal. And it's not just about like adjusting a few numbers. It is literally needed, like much needed, especially with the archetypes that are the most in enemies' faces. So I really hope they address this as soon as possible. And the option 2, like I said, give better options for max res and LE damage in general. Obviously you can get 2 max res on jewels on suffixes, but that is like only 1 res. So you would have to stack, I think, 22 jewel suffixes to get to 90 max res, and there just isn't really any tools there. There's very little all maximum LE res right now. Another thing I'd like to change is the way we approach movement speed right now. So the only real way to get movement speed in PoE2 is from boots, and they go from 10% all the way to 35% increased. I think 30 starts at level 70 and then 35 somewhere around level 80. And it's kind of like a must-have unless you are a Temporalis build, which I mean is completely out there. We'll see what happens to that. But it really feels right now that we don't have much agency. And it's not just that we don't have much agency or that I need like PoE1 zooming. I definitely do not. Whenever you get your character level higher and higher, it's nice to see progression on the screen. Getting more damage and more defense when enemies also get stronger is not really something you see. It's not a progression. In PoE1, for example, when you start out versus where you end up is a crazy journey. Like, going from whatever you do on day 1 to a Mage Blood build is like mind-blowing. In PoE2, it's kind of like you get from 30% to 35% movement speed and you're like, okay. I guess now I'm at this part of the tree, 2% extra movement speed. I get an emerald with 2% movement speed, and it just feels very lackluster. It doesn't really feel like you're making much progress. So I would really like if that power level also kind of got translated to the screen. You have this very awkward temporalis at the end that you can get when you're basically entering cheat codes, right? Sure, that can happen, but until then, something to keep you going and let you know that you're progressing would be very nice. Example would be like in D4 or whatever, like move speed on Amulet or whatever. I'm not really sure what the solution here is, but I'm sure we could sprinkle a little bit more somewhere. Another idea that somebody had was maybe give a little bit of base movement speed every 10 levels or so. That would also alleviate a little bit of that. But yeah, I don't want the game to be PoE1. I would just like it to be a little bit more responsive, especially because enemies are hella fast in this game. Number 8, more agency for crafting. And I'll be honest here, I don't think I have too much of constructive feedback here because I don't really know how you cannot be PoE1 and actually do it better. I think PoE1, while being very convoluted and bloated, I think every system in itself makes a lot of sense, and a lot of them could be ported over and do very well. And yeah, that's what a lot of PoE2 players don't like to hear, but it's just, I don't know what else. Otherwise, I can just say go wild, do some more stuff, make omens more accessible. One thing I will say that's a little bit hypocritical and a little bit weird from people who say, no, they don't want Orb of Scourings, they don't want this and that from PoE1, is, well, I mean, the game still takes stuff from PoE1, right? Like, half of these orbs literally do exactly the same, or even more, do exactly the same in PoE1. So they clearly are borrowing from PoE1, and they are very aware of how good the baseline PoE1 experience is. So I don't see why they couldn't do that a little bit more, maybe freshen up things a little bit. I'm not saying Orb of Scourings needs to be in the game, but there could definitely be done a lot more here. That's all I'm going to say for now. And number 9 is very important to me. It is Nerf mid-league. And this is something where I'm a little bit hypocritical because I was complaining last league in the first week that there was nerfs. If you didn't know, the first 3 or 4 builds that I played while leveling all got nerfed every single time. Trigger skills, gas grenade, gas arrow. I kind of had to redo everything over and over, and I got very bitchy about it. I'm gonna straight up tell you. However, it's not in the way that I don't want them to do that. It's just something where I was frustrated because of the gold cost. At the start, I couldn't really respec my character. I didn't have enough gold, so I literally had to reroll in some situations. We're talking like day 1, not day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, stuff like that, which is very awkward. And if the gold cost had been lower and I would have been more flexible, I wouldn't really have minded. But it seemed like they got a lot of backlash in general from those changes in week 1, and they kind of said, oh, we're gonna chill a little bit with the nerfs. And I find that pretty sad because now what they've established is this thing where they said, we're gonna do it like PoE1 leagues where we're not gonna interfere during the leagues. we're only going to do very, very little things. And that just doesn't make sense for me in early access. They're going to make so many sweeping changes over and over and over until they find a formula that fits. And I honestly feel like this could all have been avoided by just giving easier access to respecs, at least at the very start. Maybe even make it free. I'm not sure why there has to be friction with that and why they can't just, like, I understand it's really annoying to have your build nerfed. I've had that happen to me over and over, but it's like we kind of signed up for that as well in early access, and it's more important to me that the game gets good over a long period of time and in the long term than like some crawls in the short term. Something like Herald of Ice or Hand of Wisdom in Action or Pillar of the Cage God should just not have been in the game for this long, especially because if you have such outliers and you're gonna make it so people play those outliers, and if you nerf them, now people would flock to other builds, so you could get more data in other versions of like certain build types and whatnot. I think it's just all around bad to have these here and not have the tools to nerf it as soon as possible. We're in the Wild West right now. Why not nerf it? And yeah, like I said, I was also bitchy in week 1. I think this could be all kind of alleviated by giving people extremely easy access to respecs. We are in early access, but do the changes you need to do and don't wait for them for months. And that's about all I got to say about Path of Exile 2 right now. I'm in it for the ride. I want this game to get better and better over time. I'll be here, whether it takes a year, whether it takes 3 years. Either way. In the meantime, I'm actually pretty stoked about 0.2. I was at first a little bit lukewarm, but now that it gets closer and closer, I'm kind of looking forward to it. I'll be streaming it over on twitch.tv/Palsteron, and join the Discord if you want alerts. But in general, I just want to get PoE2 into a state where the end game is so enjoyable to me that I get into this flow state, right? Like the thing where you wake up and you're like, oh my god, I gotta get to my PC. And currently the feeling I have is I really like making builds. I really like playing through the campaign. But then at some point, the novelty kind of falls off, especially once I get into this here. And while last league, I did actually have some fun with repetitive ultimatums. I don't really mind repetitive stuff. And maybe this league I'll just do second must if I don't enjoy it again. I would really like for them to make a lot more out of this, and that's also why a lot of my points were focused on Endgame and the Atlas. But yeah, as always, after the reveal stream, I'm going to talk about what's new. I'm going to talk about what our league start builds in general. It's obviously very busy in April, also with last debug and stuff like that. But yeah, in general, stay tuned. And since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.